Hey everyone, my name is MJ, and today I'm going to introduce my YouTube channel, Transforming Known Solutions. So I think most of my videos will be like this, just casual chats. I'm going to be discussing all sorts of things in general related to philosophy, religion, modern life, self-improvement, spirituality, and then as well as like cutting edge sort of developments in the modern world like AI and things related to that sort of thing, social media, and so on. And you might be thinking, oh, MJ, what does social media and AI have to do with religion? We'll get into that later in another video, but for now, I just kind of want to discuss a little bit of an intro to my channel. I think I'll keep my videos pretty short, and the videos will be more audio-based. The video itself will not be too important. I might find various interesting things to put in the background, but I think I'm more audio focused, maybe something you can listen to while doing the dishes or whatever. Anyway, today I just want to briefly kind of explain what the title of my channel, Transforming Known Solutions, refers to. What does that mean? What is a known solution, and why would we want to transform it at all? So, in order to understand what a solution is, you have to understand what a problem is. And this can be a complicated question, but I think one easy way to frame this is to think about the what, the why, and the how. So the what describes the current state of the world, which is generally like a static system, like what color is the sky? What is in my fridge? What is the number of grains of sand on Earth? So these questions can have various levels of complexity and difficulty. For example, the sky color is a lot easier than knowing the number of grains of sand. But regardless, they generally ask, like, what are the properties of the current state of something? It's not considering multiple states. It's only looking at like one static state. And the current state of the world can be complicated, and things are always moving. So these questions can be hard, but they are generally pretty well understood by science and well described by science, right? We have a good understanding of what things are. We have a good understanding of atoms and the standard model and like laws of quantum physics and chemistry. So we can precisely describe most things very well. When we ask, what is this? What is this? What is this? And we keep going deeper, we have a good understanding. But why questions are a whole new level compared to what questions. So why questions consider the current state, but also consider previous states in an attempt to answer the question of what caused this state? Why did this state happen, right? So I could say, why is the sky blue? And I would have to describe some sort of process that the light hitting the atmosphere and scattering in this way over time, why does this cause the sky to be blue? Or I could say, why is my fridge empty? Well, because it used to have food in it, but then I ate it, and now it's no longer there. So I have to describe multiple states and some sort of process as well. And these can be very, very difficult because it requires us to use things like evidence or reasoning, right? We look at the current state and we try to make some assertions about why something happened, and even though we understand the what very well, we understand the laws of physics and the laws of nature very well, when these states are so complex and they contain so many moving parts and different atoms and chaotic components, they progress very unpredictably, and it can almost be impossible to sort of perfectly describe the why, because we are not just trying to describe this current state, but rather we are looking at the causal relationship between potentially an infinite number of slices of reality as we go back in time. So what does this have to do with solutions? Well, the most interesting question to me is the how. So how is like why, but instead of asking about a previous state and what caused the current state, we ask what future state can be achieved from this current state. So if I have some current state and some idea of what I want, right, some problem that I want to solve, for example, my fridge could be empty, and I say, okay, I want food in my fridge. How do I fix this problem? Well, I could walk to the store and buy groceries. I could drive to the store and buy groceries. So there can be multiple different solutions to the same problem, but in both cases, I solve my problem even if there's nuanced pros and cons to different methods. And the reason I think how questions are so interesting is because they're on a whole nother level of difficulty even when compared to why questions, right? Because with why, at least we're working with the things that are already there, the past states that have already happened and their consequences are visible. We can look at things and collect evidence and understand the logical progression of past states. But with how, those future states aren't yet realized. So you still have the issue of the world being chaotic and complex, but you don't even have the privilege of considering a state that actually happened. The other interesting thing about how questions is that they have multiple solutions. So a why question really kind of only has one solution. It may be kind of impossible to know, but it kind of has one ultimate solution. And same with the what question, but usually there's many different ways to solve a given problem, many different ways to figure out a solution to a how question. However, not all solutions are created equal, right? Like, I think it makes a lot more sense for me to walk to the store and buy groceries than to order a limo to go to the store for half of them and then order the other half online, right? Like, there's generally some reason or some nuance to the problem at hand that sort of limits the optimality of certain solutions. And this is ultimately why I'm claiming that how is the most complex out of all three. Because with what, the question is only as complex as the current world, which can be very complex, but it's a lot less complex than the why, where you have to consider the current world, but also the sort of complexity and the chaos of its progression over time. But with how, you have to consider the complexity of the progression and the current world, but you also have to consider the complexity of potential processes, right? The many different ways to solve a given problem and those consequences. So that adds another level of complexity, making how infinitely more complex than why, which is infinitely more complex than what. So a solution being an answer to any question, I think, is most interesting when that question is a how question and it's most complicated, it's least known, right? Some solutions are very well known. For example, what's 2 plus 2? That's 4. Easy, right? But that's a simple math question that only has one answer, right? It's more like a simple what question. While a how question might be more analogous to some crazy looking polynomial with millions of variables that has many solutions, right? Some are known, some are not known, some are probably better than others. And in the modern world, many of these questions are probably pretty well optimized. For example, how do I manufacture steel or something like that? I'm sure that whatever the people got going on at the steel manufacturing plant is a very efficient way of manufacturing it relative to, costs or this or that. But this is what makes this study so interesting to me, is because you can always change the optimal solution by considering a different context and changing, what your overall goals might be. For example, like, if I want to go to the store to get food and I want exercise, then I can walk to the store. But if I'm interested in speed, then I might just drive, right? It's not that one solution is inherently better, but it requires some sort of overall ideal for me to be considering in the first place. So ultimately, that is why I'm interested in this topic, and I was inspired to create a whole YouTube channel around it, is that I think many solutions are unknown, and to transform them is ultimately how progress is made, especially because, some of the greatest how questions are incredibly difficult. When you start to get complicated, like how do I grow a YouTube channel? How do I cure my depression? How do we build a perfect society? Right? Even if there's some suggestions and, partial answers to these questions, they can always be refined, and the optimality seems very hidden. And I think many people are too confident that, someone has the answers out there and someone has the hows figured out, when in fact it's almost like a never-ending chase. Anyway, that will probably be it from me. Just a short introduction to my channel. I'll be back soon discussing, all sorts of topics probably. So thank you to anyone who has made it this far, and I hope you have a wonderful day.